You know the moment. Someone asks for more than you have to give. More time, more energy, more of you. Every part of you wants to say no. You say yes anyway. Then the resentment shows up, not at them, at you. Somewhere along the way you learned that a boundary makes you cold, selfish, unloving. So instead you shrink. You over-explain. You apologize for wanting space. And the guilt doesn't even wait for the word no to leave your mouth. It shows up the moment you think it. Today, you're going to use the principle of polarity, the fourth Hermetic law, to set boundaries a completely different way, not as rejection, not as a wall between you and the people you love, as a conscious shift along a continuum you're already standing on. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to move your position without guilt, because you'll finally see something almost nobody explains. Guilt and boundaries were never opposites. They were never even on different scales. Step 1. Understand the pole you're actually on. The Kybalion states it directly. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. And opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Hot and cold are not two different things. They are one thing, temperature, measured at different points on the same scale. There is no line where hot ends and cold begins. There's only more or less of the same energy. Love and self-abandonment work exactly the same way. Devotion and disappearing are not opposites, sitting on separate scales, one moral and one immoral. They sit on the same pole. What separates them is degree, not nature. This is the reframe that changes everything, and it's worth sitting with for a moment. Saying no is not the opposite of love. It cannot be, because they're built from the same substance, the same underlying energy of care. It is a different degree of the same current that makes you show up for people in the first place. The same energy that makes you generous is the energy you're allowed to direct back toward yourself without becoming a colder, different person. Most people fight boundaries their whole lives because they were taught to think in false opposites: good versus bad, giving versus selfish, loving versus cruel, as if these were two separate ingredients instead of one ingredient measured at 2 points. Polarity dissolves that split entirely. You are not switching from loving to unloving when you set a boundary. You are sliding your position on a pole that was always yours to move on. The same way a dimmer switch slides between bright and dim without ever becoming a different circuit or a different kind of light. Step 2. Locate your current position before you try to move it. This is the step almost everyone skips, and it's exactly why most boundary advice fails on contact. You cannot consciously shift a position you haven't first consciously located. Think of one relationship right now where you consistently give past your capacity. Not the whole category of people-pleasing in the abstract. One specific person, one specific recurring ask. Your mother calling every night when you need the evening to decompress. A coworker who quietly routes their unfinished work to your desk because you've never once said it's too much. A partner who expects you to absorb their mood without naming what it costs you. A friend who only calls when something is wrong, never when something is good. Pick one. Now notice what happens in your body the moment they ask you for something. A tightening in the chest, a held breath, a reflex yes that leaves your mouth before your mind even weighs in on the decision. That reflex is your current position on the pole, the degree you've been living at by default, not by choice. Write it down if it helps. The person, the pattern, the physical signal that tips you off. This single act of naming is already a shift in mentalism, because you're moving the pattern out of the automatic and into something you can actually see, examine, and decide about, instead of just react to. Step 3. Slide the degree on purpose. This is the mechanics of the boundary itself, and it's simpler than the internet makes it sound. You are not moving from one pole to its opposite. You are not going from always yes to always no. That swing is just as extreme, only in the other direction, and it collapses just as fast because it's still not a position you can actually hold. You are choosing a new degree closer to the center and holding it without apologizing for it. In practice, this sounds like, I can't take this on this week, but I want to help you find another way. To a parent, I love our calls, and I need my evenings to actually rest. Can we talk on weekends instead? To a partner, I want to support you through this, and I need 20 minutes to myself first before I can actually be present. At work, I can own this by Thursday, not today, if that works for the deadline. Notice what all four have in common. They don't erase the connection. They don't slam a wall down between you and the other person. They state a new degree, still warm, still engaged, just no longer positioned at the extreme end of self-erasure. That's the entire technique. A boundary framed as a degree shift instead of a rejection keeps the relationship on the same pole, instead of forcing you to feel like you have to leave it entirely just to protect yourself from it. There's also a timing element most people get backwards. They wait until they're already at the extreme end of the pole, exhausted, resentful, one request away from snapping, and then they try to state a degree shift from that place. It comes out sharp because it's not really a slide anymore. It's a break under pressure. The principle of polarity works best applied early, while you can still feel the middle of the scale, not after you've been pushed all the way to one edge. That's why step 2 matters so much. Locating your position before you're in crisis gives you room to slide calmly instead of lurching. And if the other person reacts badly to a calm degree shift, that reaction is information, not proof you did something wrong. Somebody who's only comfortable with you at the extreme end of self-abandonment will feel any movement toward the center as loss. That's worth noticing, not necessarily worth avoiding. One more distinction worth making. Sliding your degree is not the same as negotiating away your position the moment you feel resistance. If someone pushes back on your new degree and you immediately soften back toward your old one, you haven't stated a boundary, you've floated a suggestion. The words can stay exactly the same. What matters is whether you hold the degree through the discomfort of the other person's reaction, not just through their agreement. Step 4. Anchor the new degree so it actually holds over time. Here's what nobody tells you about boundaries. The pole has momentum. The Kybalion also names the principle of rhythm. Everything swings like a pendulum, in and out, up and down, back toward wherever it came from. If you don't consciously interrupt that swing, you will snap right back to your old default degree the very next time guilt shows up, usually within days, sometimes within hours. This is why a boundary set once and never reinforced quietly disappears within a week, and why so many people conclude boundaries just don't work for me, when really nothing was ever anchored in the first place. To anchor the shift, pick one small, repeatable action tied directly to your new position. A phrase you say to yourself before responding to the specific request you named back in step 2. A 10-second pause before you answer, so the old reflex doesn't get to speak for you automatically. A single line you write down after every interaction where you actually held the new degree, so you can watch the evidence build over days instead of trusting your memory alone. The anchor isn't the boundary itself. It's what keeps the pendulum from swinging you back to where you started, before the new degree has a real chance to become your new default. Expect the pendulum to test you. The principle of rhythm doesn't promise a straight line, it promises a swing. And the swing back toward your old degree is not a sign of failure, it's the predictable physics of the pole itself. The first time you hold the new degree and the other person pushes back, you will feel a pull toward over-correcting into a harder no than you intended, or collapsing back into the old yes out of sheer discomfort. Neither extreme is the anchor doing its job. The anchor is what lets you notice the pull, name it as momentum instead of truth, and return to the same measured degree you chose in step 3. Over a few repetitions, the swing gets smaller. This is also where it helps to track which relationships respond to the shift versus which ones escalate against it. A small amount of friction that settles within a week or two is the pendulum finding its new resting point. Escalating pressure that grows instead of settling is a different signal entirely, and it usually means the pattern in that relationship was never really about your degree on the pole. It was about someone else's discomfort with you having one at all. Give any single anchor a real trial before judging whether it worked. One held boundary that gets tested once doesn't tell you much either way. Hold the same degree across 3 or 4 separate instances with the same person before deciding if the relationship is settling into the new position or actively resisting it. That's enough repetition for the pendulum's real resting point to become visible. Here's what actually changes when you apply this. The guilt doesn't vanish because you found a clever script or memorized the right words. It fades because you stopped believing the lie that boundaries and love live on opposite ends of 2 separate scales. You see clearly now, you never left the pole. You simply moved your degree on it, consciously, the same way you'd adjust a dial instead of ripping out the whole circuit and starting from nothing. The relationship you were afraid of damaging usually doesn't break. It often gets more honest because you're no longer showing up from resentment and exhaustion. You're showing up from a degree you actually chose. And people can feel that even when they can't name what changed. The guilt that still shows up sometimes in the first few weeks isn't proof you did something wrong. It's just the pendulum's momentum exactly as the principle of rhythm predicts, expected, temporary, and no longer mistaken for a verdict on your character. If you take one thing from this video, apply it today, not someday. Pick the one relationship, the one recurring ask you named, back in step 2. The next time it comes up, don't reach for your old reflex, and don't overcorrect into a hard, cold no, just to prove to yourself that you can. State your new degree out loud or in writing, using the same shape from step 3. Acknowledge the connection, name the shift, hold it without apologizing for it. Notice what your body does in that 10-second pause. That's the anchor doing its job, right on time. If this reframed how you think about boundaries, apply the principle of polarity to one more relationship this week, and tell me in the comments which one you're starting with. This is a philosophical practice for everyday relationships, not a substitute for professional support. If what you're facing involves real harm, not just guilt, please reach out to someone who can help you directly.